The second thing to talk about today is famine. The third seal. When the third seal was opened, there was a rider on a black horse holding a pair of scales, and it says a quart of wheat for a denarius and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, right? A denarius was said to be a day's wage for a laborer at that time. So, a measure of wheat, this measure, called a koinix, is said to be about 1 liter in volume. So, the situation described is that 1 liter of wheat could cost about $100 or $200. This means that due to severe famine, prices skyrocket. The price of food rises dramatically. I can't remember if it was when I was in my first or third year of high school, but around that time the Gulf War broke out. During the Gulf War in Baghdad, a sack of flour, a sack of wheat was said to cost about $400. So you see, a war can lead to famine. Looking at the real-time statistics, the global data was updated again as of 7 p.m. yesterday. Currently, over 847,650,000 people are suffering from malnutrition. And just yesterday alone, over 4,500 people died from hunger. That's the number of people who died from starvation in just one day. Because we live in a very prosperous nation, it might be difficult for us to fully sense the seriousness of this issue. But across wide regions of the world, in many different countries and communities, countless people are suffering from poverty, from hunger, and from severe malnutrition. That's why the Washington Post stated in 2017 that the world was suffering from the worst famine since World War II. We tend to think that the world is becoming more prosperous and better off as time goes on, when of course many places were devastated by extreme war and destruction. But in reality, current analyses show that since World War II, things did improve for a while, but now, as of recently, in 2017, it was said that we are experiencing the worst famine yet. According to the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, chronic famine has been on the rise since 2014 and continues to increase. So, while it may seem like the world is getting better, in reality, these famines are actually increasing. Ethnic conflicts and wars and related issues like these are also continuously on the rise. There are many different causes that lead to famine. In the past, things were simple. Famine used to be caused by simple reasons like lack of rain or war, but the causes of famine in today's modern world are much more diverse, and those causes are quite significant. This is very important for us, and the reason it's important is because these are problems that are not easy to solve. One of them is desertification. According to real-time global statistics, as of 7 p.m. yesterday, more than 4.68 million hectares of forest have disappeared just this year. 1 hectare is 2.47 acres. To put it simply, you can think of it as about 2.5 acres. 1 hectare is 2.5 acres. So that's over 11.6 million acres. Just this year alone, more than 11.6 million acres of forest have disappeared. So year after year, as time goes by, these forests are disappearing, and the scale of this area is truly enormous. Starting in August and continuing into September this year, there have been ongoing wildfires in California, USA. These wildfires lasted for over a month, and that's how it usually goes once a fire breaks out there. It's always been like that in the past as well. Every year when a fire breaks out in California, it tends to go on for several weeks. And these wildfires don't just happen once a year, they occur multiple times. And it's not just limited to that area. Similar incidents are happening in other regions across the United States as well. So forests are continuously disappearing, and as a result, desertification continues to spread. As these areas are abandoned and left barren like wastelands, they become unmanageable. And as time goes on, the amount of land turning into desert is dramatically increasing all over the world. Just this year alone, more than 10.8 million hectares of land have become desertified. I just mentioned that 4.68 million hectares of forest have disappeared. So this figure is more than double that amount, about 2.5 times greater. Such enormous areas are continuing to disappear year after year from this earth, from the very world in which we are living. Desertification is continuing to progress. And as I explained earlier, the climate is getting drier, and now the Earth's temperature is continuously rising, reaching up to 50 degrees Celsius. So even in our country, was it 2 years ago? There was a year when the heat was so intense it was almost unbearable. And now, even in advanced countries like those in Europe and in the United States, we are seeing more and more deaths caused by extreme heat. As temperatures rise and the climate becomes drier, that dryness is causing wildfires to increase more and more. You've all seen this, right? Because of the fires, you see these mushroom clouds forming, just like the nuclear clouds that appear when a nuclear bomb explodes. These mushroom clouds are created by the wildfires. If you look at photos taken from a distance, the area covered by these clouds might look small, but in reality, the area that the mushroom cloud covers is actually very large. Then in those areas, sunlight is blocked, leading to secondary and even tertiary problems related to food supply. Have you all seen the movie Interstellar? One of the most memorable and impressive scenes I remember is this. At the beginning of the movie, there's a scene where the main characters can't see ahead because of a sandstorm. Everything is completely covered by the sandstorm, and that's happening because of desertification. So, the movie Interstellar is set in the year 2067, portraying a future time. By then, desertification has progressed so much, so people cannot see clearly because of the sandstorms. They have to cover their mouths, they cannot breathe properly, and when they go outside, they struggle to breathe. We are living like this now, wearing masks because of COVID. But in that time, as the climate crisis worsens, problems such as air pollution, dust, and sandstorms intensify. As desertification progresses, it becomes very difficult to step outside and say, the air feels good, as we do now. When making films like that, the people who produce them do a great deal of research. Many of them practically live in libraries. This goes for both the production team and the script writers. They study a lot about historical, futuristic, and scientific topics, and based on that, they create the background for the film. In other words, one of the parts created based on research and its results is the depiction in Interstellar of desertification persisting for a long time, causing sandstorms that make it hard to see ahead and even difficult to breathe properly. Imagine a world like the one in that scene, with massive sandstorms everywhere due to the changing climate. How could any crops possibly grow in conditions like that? And there would also be problems like the sun not shining properly on the crops, so they can't grow well, along with various other issues. That's why in the movie, the only thing left to eat is corn. Even if human civilization continues to develop, boasting advanced economies and cutting-edge technology, if we can't solve these problems of nature and disasters, in the end, other crops can't grow properly, so only corn can be cultivated, leading to a situation where corn is the only food available. This is also depicted in the story. And another reason is this. In the past, water was mainly used for agriculture, but now, with so much urbanization and the improvement in people's quality of life, we use a tremendous amount of water. Back in the 1950s and 60s, unlike today, not many people took daily showers like we do now. Still, even then, people would shower at least once a week, right? And as we use large amounts of water for washing, with the improvement in human quality of life, domestic water usage has skyrocketed. And on top of that, we also use an enormous amount of water for industrial purposes. As industry and manufacturing have developed, we've been drawing massive amounts of groundwater from around the world, and as a result, these water sources are gradually decreasing and the groundwater is drying up. This is now considered one of the main causes of more frequent droughts. The US National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, has said this. Groundwater around the world is drying up. NASA officially announced, based on a detailed analysis of satellite data from 2015, that global groundwater reserves are rapidly drying up. So now, as a direct consequence, we find ourselves right in the midst of intense international water disputes. The whole world is talking about this. And Goldman Sachs has also said that water will be the oil of the next century. In the past, oil has caused conflicts, especially in the Middle East, with the Middle East, the US, and many other countries fighting over oil. But now in the 21st century, it is predicted that wars will be fought over water. So it has been said that humanity in the 21st century will suffer from water shortages. As the climate worsens, the droughts make the land so dry that wildfires break out more easily. This eventually leads to desertification, and we're trapped in this endless, vicious cycle. Each of these factors affects the others. As a result, this soon leads to the problem of food shortages. The famine mentioned in the third seal is directly linked to these issues: desertification, drought, and war. Honestly, when I first read the book of Revelation, I used to feel a disconnect when reading about wars, famines, and plagues. It was hard to grasp how such things could happen in the prosperous world we live in today. But as I continued to research and look into these materials, I was truly astonished. After all, this was written about 2,000 years ago, right? The words that Jesus spoke are astonishingly coming true in the very era we are living in now. Jesus knew and foresaw what would happen 2,000 years later, and he prophesied about it. He revealed it to us. So, not only did Jesus say that nation will rise against nation, but also that people will rise against people, and it's truly astonishing how this is happening so dramatically in the era we are living in now. Even with this issue of famine, we see how human civilization and its advancements have ultimately and inevitably resulted in our own ruin. We destroyed nature for our own sake, but now it has led to disastrous and uncontrollable consequences. And now we're seeing that it's all happening just as the Lord warned us 2,000 years ago. As we saw in the video earlier, there are a lot of extreme weather events happening right now, all over the place. So in the video we saw, they mentioned places like Denver in the United States and a few other locations, but such events have also occurred in Europe and in Russia as well. For example, in extremely hot regions, the temperature suddenly drops from over 40 or 50 degrees to much lower within just a few hours overnight, leading to heavy snowfall and turning it into winter. And in very cold places, it suddenly gets warm enough for people to go swimming. Things like this are happening right now. Abnormal weather events keep happening. When my eldest child had her graduation ceremony, it was around mid-May. It must have been around May 15th in New York. Since she graduated from SUNY, we went to New York for the ceremony. Just in case, I brought that purple parka, the same one the pastor is wearing right now. But even with it on, I was shivering so much that it felt like I was literally freezing to death. If I hadn't brought that with me, I really wouldn't have been able to attend the ceremony. But the weather had actually been really hot the day before. Oh, actually not the day before, but maybe 2 days after that. I went to a park in Manhattan and it was so hot, although I was wearing a short-sleeved shirt. I had to take off my outer layer and just wear the short sleeves, but it was still too hot. The weather was so crazy. So I said, oh wow, New York weather is really insane. I mean, 2 days ago it was so cold that even wearing the parka, I was shivering. Then just 2 days later, it was unbearably hot. These kinds of strange weather patterns are happening all over the world right now. This is what they call a man-made disaster. It's a disaster caused by humans. Coming back to what I was saying, when that kind of event happens, crops will suddenly experience a cold snap. That impacts agricultural crops and it directly leads to food shortages. Consequently, all these problems are ultimately linked to food security. On top of that, this year, the desert locusts were overwhelming as well. If we had more time, I would have shown you the video I have, and if you see it, it's truly horrifying. The locusts are unbelievably terrifying. These locusts are even bigger than my hand. These extraordinarily massive locusts reproduce at an exceptionally rapid pace, and in just a few weeks, their total numbers increase to an absolutely staggering and overwhelming degree. And when these locusts pass through an area, as I recall, they can consume in a single day enough foods to feed 35,000 people, devouring it all at once as they move through. That's the kind of disaster a locust plague is. If you see that video, you can see what a locust plague in the Bible is like. If I get a chance later, I'll show you. We all thought, come on, a locust plague in this day and age? We brushed it off. But those locusts started in Africa, swept through the entire Middle East, and pushed all the way into Pakistan, India, and China. China had heard the news months in advance that they were on the move, as if His Majesty the locusts had officially begun their journey. Upon hearing the news before the locusts reached their own country, China offered to send 100,000 ducks to the affected country as support. But although they said they would help, that country's environment and climate weren't suitable for the ducks to survive. So in the end, the offer was rejected and it didn't work out. Imagine how desperate they must have been to even suggest an army of 100,000 ducks, just to have them eat the locusts. But as it turns out, this wasn't a problem that could be solved with a few ducks. The scale was just overwhelming. And during that period, there was a widespread and severe food security crisis across Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. This is exactly why we cannot be arrogant. It shows the sheer weakness of humanity. Human existence is so small. After all, everything that happens through nature is God's doing. Before Him, we have absolutely nothing to brag about or feel superior about. If He just releases a swarm of locusts, they sweep across the world and destroy everything, and then we're left struggling. So, among all these various causes and issues, one of the most serious problems that arises is the water problem. Ethiopia and Egypt have fought fiercely over the Nile River, and they're still in conflict even now. As for the Ganges River, India, Nepal, China, and Bangladesh are all disputing over this single river, each in conflict with the others. And with just the Mekong River, Myanmar, Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, China, and Laos are all in dispute with each other. And the Jordan River, you know the Jordan River, right? Over this single Jordan River, Israel, Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon are all in conflict, constantly fighting over this one waterway, this one river. These kinds of things are happening. Take Ethiopia, for example. They built the Grand Renaissance Dam on the Nile River. Now, consider Egypt. They rely on that river for 90% of their water supply. But now Ethiopia built a dam and they are regulating the flow. In other words, the water isn't reaching downstream like it used to. So issues like this are pushing nations to the very brink of war. There are many similar situations like this. For another example, Turkey is also facing a lot of problems right now. Turkey has built a lot of dams, 19 or 20 I think, and one of them is the Ilisu Dam. Just by building this one dam, Iraq was put on high alert. That's because, in fact, the Tigris and Euphrates rivers are extremely important water sources that basically sustain the Middle East. The Mesopotamian civilization developed around the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. The reason that civilization developed in that land is because people gathered and lived around these rivers. They needed water to survive. Now, the countries with these two rivers, namely Iraq, Turkey, and Syria, all depend on this water to live. Iraq, in particular, relies on these rivers for 70% of its water. But Turkey has gone ahead and built a dam. So they're controlling the flow of water from the Tigris River and not sending all of it downstream. So Iraq goes into a state of emergency and conflicts and various problems start to arise. As I mentioned, Egypt raised a huge outcry when Ethiopia built its dam. But the irony is, Egypt had already built the Aswan Dam years before. This very issue nearly pushed them into a war with Sudan. These kinds of things are happening. Moreover, the water levels of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers are steadily decreasing, and the Jordan River is also shrinking significantly these days. Because everyone is drawing water from there, the water keeps decreasing. As you all know, the Jordan River flows into the Dead Sea. But now, the Dead Sea has split into two. It used to be one vast body of water, but as it dries up and the water level drops, it's literally breaking apart. This is a clear sign that water is vanishing all across the globe. And because of this disappearing water, nations are being pushed into constant conflict and even war. So I looked it up on Wikipedia, and this is what it said. Shall we read it together? Let's read it together. The three combo of war, famine, and plague is a state collapse tech tree that is surprisingly easy to find. War brings famine, then social systems paralyzed by both combined with abnormal population density like armies or refugees lead straight to infectious diseases. There is a reason why this three combo hits all at once. It's not for nothing that one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse is famine. I don't know who wrote this, but he mentions the four horsemen in Revelation, right? So war, famine, and disease, that is, plague, these three happen as a set. When war breaks out, then famine follows as a result, and many people die in the war. Also, there are refugees, and since many people have to live together in one place, diseases can spread easily. With so many corpses, more epidemics arise. We can see that all of these are interconnected. And because of these various issues arising from the climate as we see now, these things are still a possible story even today. As I mentioned last week, war, famine, and plague always travel as a set in the prophetic books of the Old Testament. I said that whenever God judges this earth, these three always come together as a set. So I gave you representative passages from Ezekiel and Jeremiah. Even with a simple search, there are over 40 instances where famine, war, and plague are mentioned together in the Old Testament alone. When God executes his judgment, he specifically mentions these three elements as his instruments. And interestingly, experts and scholars today who study and research these fields are saying the exact same thing. They too refer to this as the three combo of war, famine, and plague. That's right. So, when we look at the book of Revelation now, these issues of war, famine, and plague, some might think, oh, this was written 2,000 years ago. But this is not something we can treat lightly or take casually. Rather, since it is content prophesied and revealed by Jesus Christ himself, the sovereign Lord who knows and guides all of human history, we can see that these things are actually happening in our lives in this very era. And Frederick, the author of the book, The History of Disease, said the following. Let's read this together as well. In this way, humanity's three great enemies, plagues, famines, and wars, have continued to increase. Plagues, famines, and wars interact with each other, with one often triggering another. This is what he says. This is not something like, it's not a religious book or anything like that. It was published by Garam Planning, which is not a Christian publisher. In other words, the findings of these experts, those who study climate issues or social problems, point to the exact same conclusion. So, what we can see here is that experts and scholars are providing evidence that supports and backs up what the Bible has already said. I've mentioned various issues to you: desertification, the loss of forests, climate change, the vicious cycle of droughts leading to famine, and the growing water crisis, among many others. This third famine is very closely and deeply connected to our lives today as we live through the late 20th and now the 21st century. Do you find it convincing that the famine described in the third seal is deeply connected to the global crises we are experiencing today? Yes, I certainly do. As I was meticulously researching and gathering all of this information, I really became convinced. As I mentioned last time, based on certain structural aspects and other biblical evidence, I believe we are living in an era that has already moved into the opening of the fourth seal. I said that we are the generation living right before the seven begins, and I can see that all these things happening now are supporting that. That's why I see the famine from the third seal as being directly connected to the problems occurring in the world we live in today.